Hey everybody, welcome to Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell, and I could not be more excited to continue sharing with you guys personal finance topics that I think could be useful for you in your long-term financial journey. Today, we are going to be talking about cash. Of all things, cash. And I'm going to be talking about cash being trash and cash being king, and how these are juxtaposing ideas, and they are things that you hear in the media all the time. And I'm going to give you my view on whether I think cash is trash or cash is king, or maybe it's somewhere in the middle. Okay, so we're going to discuss the uses of cash today in our financial lives, and then we're going to discuss the reasons that cash may not be such a good thing in our financial lives. And hopefully you can take a lot away from this episode and know exactly how to manage your own cash in your financial life. So stay tuned for all that and more in today's episode. Before we get started though, if you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's really good supplemental materials to all the things that I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And if you need somebody to help you to build a financial plan and keep you accountable to that plan over the long term, then I can do that. Just DM me on any of the major social media platforms and tell me that you are interested in financial coaching sessions, and you and I can begin working together, creating financial goals that are specific for you and your family's financial life. And then we can push towards the attaining of those goals, and then ultimately attaining of long-term financial freedom, which looks different for everybody, but is what I hope for every single person who watches or listens to the show on a day-to-day basis. Now, depending on who you listen to and when you listen to them is actually a very, very big part of this, right? But depending on who you listen to and when you listen to them, you may hear people say that cash is trash, and you may also hear them say cash is king. And they can mean many different things by these statements. Okay, but a couple of very notable individuals have coined each one of these phrases as their own, whether or not they tried to do so. Cash is king is something that Dave Ramsey said many times. He says, debt is dumb, cash is king. And basically all he's saying is that when you have money, you can do things. And when you're out of debt, then you actually have money. And so cash wins out. Cash is king. Okay, but then there is Ray Dalio on the other side, who has said multiple times that cash is trash. Well, he talks about cash being trash in terms of inflation, in terms of investing for your future, and in terms of the fact that your money is going to be worth less over time, so cash is trash. So you don't want to be holding cash, is what he is implying. So these are two different sides of the same argument, right? These are two different sides of whether or not we think that cash is a good thing in our financial life or cash is a negative thing. Well, I want to make the argument for both, right? I want to make the argument as to why cash may be trash and why cash may be king, and then give you some closing thoughts on exactly the way I think about cash and the way I think about dealing with actual money and not just investments, or not just dealing with your debt or whatever else. How I actually do my own cash management, okay? So let us start with the idea that cash is trash. Okay, why may cash be trash? Right? Don't we want cash? Don't we want money in our pockets? Don't we want to have money that we can spend on things? Absolutely, we do. Okay, but the problem with cash is that over time, in an inflationary economy, which we live in an inflationary economy where we have positive inflation that is typically eating away at the purchasing power of your dollars, meaning that your dollars can buy less today than they could 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, right? The purchasing power of your money has declined. And given the fact that the purchasing power of your money has declined, then you could make the argument that cash is trash, because cash is not going to maintain its same value. Yes, a dollar is still a dollar is still a dollar, right? But if you gave a dollar to somebody 100 years ago, it means a lot more than giving a dollar to somebody today. A dollar to somebody today is like, what do I need a dollar for? Or on an even smaller scale, think about a quarter 50 years ago. Giving somebody a quarter was a far larger deal than it is today, because who uses coins, right? Do you really use coins other than getting it back if you pay for something in cash, which most people don't even pay for things in cash anymore, right? So a quarter is not worth what it once was, okay? And this is all the work of inflation. As we see more and more inflation, then the value of our money is going to decline, which is going to make cash a worse and worse thing to be holding. Okay, and I've told you this before, especially when it comes to your emergency fund and your savings accounts, that if you have money there that is set aside for emergencies, you may have to add to it over time. You may have to systematically add a little bit of money here and there to that amount just to keep up with inflation, because otherwise the purchasing power of that money that you put into an emergency fund or into a savings account is going to be systematically declining over time. And that's not what we want, right? We don't want the value of our money to continue going down. But if we are just holding cash, then that's what's happening. Now, you may be saying, well, if I put $15,000 in a savings account and just have $15,000, I'll continue to have $15,000 and they'll even pay me some small amount of interest. Isn't that true? That is 100% true. Not refuting that. What I'm refuting is that $15,000 plus any very, very small amount of interest that they pay you is going to be less valuable in 10 years than it is today, right? So just stacking it into a savings account or something that does not reward you for putting your money there in some substantial way, right? Then inflation is going to eat away at the value of that money. Now, is this always a horrible thing? No, it's not always a horrible thing, because I've told you about needing emergency funds. I've told you about the use of a savings account, the use of a checking account. And we'll get into those things a little later when I make the argument for cash being king. Okay, but what we need to understand is that one of the big reasons that people say that cash is trash, because it is true that cash goes down in value, that your money is going down in value if just held in dollar bills, right? If you just had $100 bills in your hand, then those $100 bills would be worth less in 100 years than they are today. They would be worth far less than they are today. Okay, so that's the first reason that cash is trash, because of inflation and because of the decreasing purchasing power of our money over time. Now, what would be the second reason that cash is trash? Well, this is a very, very large reason that people would say that cash is trash, because in your investing life, in your savings life, in your financial life in general, you need to be building a nest egg for yourself. And in building a nest egg for yourself, this doesn't just mean saving up a lot of money. Saving up a lot of money is one thing, okay? But actually having an amount of money at retirement that you will be able to live on sustainably over a long period of time is not going to rely on cash. It's not going to rely on dollar bills. It's not going to rely on how much money you saved. Yes, savings has a large impact on the amount of money that you end up having, right? But if you just saved a bunch of money into a savings account, you are not likely to get to where you need to go. You're going to get to where you need to go by investing, by purchasing assets that are going to increase in value systematically over time, okay? So when it comes to investing, cash is trash because, again, of inflation, right? And the fact that you can purchase assets that will provide you some rate of return that is far greater than you could make in just some savings account or some checking account or a CD or whatever, right? You can invest and make a very, very large spread on what you can make on some savings account, checking account, whatever it may be. So let's just say that you put away $500 a month, right? You put away $500 a month and you did so for, let's say, for 40 years, okay? So you put away $500 a month for 40 years of your life. That's a pretty good amount that you're going to end up with. And you start with nothing, right? You're going to end up with $3.162 million if you invest that $500 a month and you make 10% annually. Okay, and even if you don't make 10% annually, let's say you only made 7% annually, that's still $1.32 million. Okay, so let's just take that as a baseline, $1.3 million, okay? Now, what if you just saved $500 a month and did that for 480 months or 40 years, okay? So you do that for 480 months, that is $240,000, okay? So the difference in investing your money versus just saving it, the exact same amount of money over the exact same time period. The difference in saving and investing is over $1 million of pure growth of your money, right? So somebody who would say that cash is trash would say that why in the world would you ever keep money in cash when you can make such a large spread on your cash? You can make such a large spread by simply investing, okay? And they're not wrong. I would 100% agree that over a long period of time, why would you keep substantial amounts of money in cash if you could just put that money into some investment, hopefully some tax advantage investing like Roth IRAs or your 401k or whatever, and make that huge spread on returns. Now, this idea really puts to shame what your parents probably always taught you to do. They probably always taught you to, spend less than you make and save money, right? Make sure that you are saving money for your future. Well, saving is part of the battle, but you must be investing because cash is trash in your investment portfolio. You are not going to make a lot of money over a long period of time in cash. And the growth of that money absolutely tells you that is the case. Now, that's $1 million spread just making 7%. If you were to make 10% on your money over that same period of time, you've got $2.9 million of growth that you left on the table if you were to have just saved that money and had $240,000 over that same period of time. Okay, so when we are investing, we must be investing in risk assets, and we must be investing in things that are going to increase in value substantially more than inflation over time to increase our purchasing power and to make sure that we have enough money to live on in retirement, because cash is trash, because the value of our money is going to decline over time. Because yes, you could save $240,000 and that would be a fantastic thing, that'd be great. But if you save $240,000, it's not going to be worth what $240,000 is worth today. So that's why you need to make some spread over inflation. Now, I would even say that any money that is not in an emergency fund, right, which you need to have an emergency fund, and we're going to talk about that here shortly, right? Any money that is not in an emergency fund and any money that is not being saved up for something that you are going to purchase in a short period of time, i.e., 5 years or less, like a new car or something of the like, or paying for your kid's school in cash or something like that, right? Anything else needs to be going into investments because cash is trash. Needs to be growing for you over a long period of time. If you can put the money away for 5 years or more, which is kind of my benchmark, if you can put money away for 5 years or more, then invest it, because otherwise cash is trash. Cash is not going to provide you the returns that you need, and it's going to eat away at the value of your money via inflation over time, okay? So that would be the argument for cash is trash, and I agree with both of those arguments. Those are both very good arguments as to why cash is trash. But what would be the argument for cash is king? There's some pretty obvious, really good arguments for cash being king as well. Now, cash being king is going to rely on the short term, okay? In the short term, cash is king, okay? In the long term, cash is trash. In the short term, cash is king, because we need to maintain a position of what we call liquidity, meaning being able to pay our bills, meaning having the money to do the things that we want to do or that we need to do in the short term. Okay, we have a liquid position where we can actually spend our money in a prudent way or spend our money frivolously if we want to do so. Okay, so cash is king when it comes to our ability to pay our bills, when it comes to our ability to go on vacation, when it comes to our ability to buy toys, to buy things that we want to buy. Cash is king. Because without cash, where are you going to be? Without cash, and this is the huge argument that Dave Ramsey has for cash being king. He says debt is dumb, cash is king. And so the obvious parallel there is that if you aren't using cash, then you must be using what? Debt, right? And we have talked at length about why debt is a bad thing and why debt is a strain on your cash flow and how debt is going to keep you from getting to where you want to get to financially, okay? So using cash, being cash heavy in the short term, or maybe not even cash heavy, but having cash that you can actually spend on the things that you want to spend in the short term is going to keep you from going into debt. It's going to keep you from having a strain on your actual cash flow. So cash is going to be king in your short-term financial life because you will need that money to do something. And if you don't have that money, you're going to go into debt, which debt is dumb. Debt is only going to weigh you down. Okay, so that would be the beginning of the cash is king argument, because without cash, we are going to be going into debt, and we don't want to be there. Another reason that cash is king is that we have to have some emergency savings. If something negative happens in our life, right? If something emergent happens in our life, something that we didn't expect, something we could not plan for, something we could not save for over time occurs in our life, and we have to pay for it. We're on the hook. Right? If your kid breaks their leg and has to go to the emergency room, and you have a deductible and some maximum out of pocket costs that you have to cover, right? Then you need to be able to cover those costs. And how do we cover those costs? How do we deal with the emergent costs in our financial lives? Well, we deal with those by having an emergency fund set aside for us in order to insure us against any tragedy in our lives, right? It is insurance against tragedy. Now, many would say, well, why would I not invest my emergency fund, right? What's the likelihood of me using it anytime soon? Well, let me tell you, using your emergency fund is not something that you ever want to do. And for a lot of people, they can go years and years and years without ever touching their emergency fund, which is fantastic. And I'm right there with you. I don't want to use my emergency fund. I would like it to just sit there, and I would like to just add a little bit to it over time to make sure that it keeps up with inflation and keeps up with purchasing power over time, and keeps the same purchasing power that it has over time. Okay, but I also know that emergencies occur. Okay, and an emergency could occur as early as 5 minutes from now, or as early as 1 second from now. Emergencies can occur at will. And when emergencies occur, you need to be able to get your hands on the money that you have. And the truth of investing is that any money that you put away for any substantial amount of time has the ability to fluctuate in the short term, right? So if you put money into the stock market a few days ago, and there was a big sell-off a few days ago in the stock market, and that was your first day investing, then that's kind of a cruddy day to start investing. But immediately you lost money. Immediately the value of what you had went down. And if you needed to get to your emergency fund, that would have been real tough. Or even on a larger scale, let's say that you had this money that you called your emergency fund, but you invested it, and you invested it in February of 2020. Well, the stock market absolutely crashed in March of 2020. And let's say at that same time when the market crashed, you had an emergency and you need to get your hands on that money. Well, you could only really get your hands on about 2/3 of what you put in, because that's all that's left, because the market took a dive, because the value of your money went down so quickly. Okay, so in order to have the emergency fund that we need to cover our needs, to cover the emergent situations in our life, right, we need to be putting away that money in cash, not in investments, in cash. So cash is king when it comes to your emergency fund, because it provides you with that security. It provides you with the fact that, the knowing that the money is going to be there, and that you don't have to worry about the value of the money at a moment's notice. You don't have to worry about the time that it's going to take for that money to get from your investment account into your bank account. You don't have to worry about any of those things. You don't have to worry about the tax implications of selling some investments and then having that money put into your account. You don't have to worry about any of that. You just take the money from your savings, put it in your checking, pay for whatever it is. Or maybe you just pay for things right out of your savings. I don't know, right? I typically will go, take things from savings, put it into checking, and then pay for whatever it is. Okay. But if you just pay for things right out of savings, that's perfectly fine. Okay. But the whole point is that you're paying for things in cash. You're paying for your emergencies, paying for the things that are emergent in your financial life. You're paying for them in cash, and cash is king when it comes to emergencies. All right. Now, what is another reason that cash is king? Well, cash is also king because we want to pay for things in full. We don't want to be going into debt. I know I hit on going into debt a little bit a moment ago, but we don't want to be going into debt. We want to be able to pay for things in full. And some of these things are the things in our lives that are the keeping up with the Jones items. And they are the things that we just can't wait. We can't wait another moment to purchase this thing, so we have to go into debt to buy it. And these are things that people rationalize going into debt for. The biggest of which, automobiles, cars, right? People want to finance their vehicles, and so they think, hey, there's no way that I can come up with this much cash in a short period of time, so I'm gonna, just borrow this money on it's just a 3% loan, or it's just a 2% loan, and I'm just gonna borrow it and pay it over time. That is dumb. Again, debt is dumb. Okay, so our ability to pay for things in full in the short term keeps us out of debt, and the only way that we're able to pay for things is if we have cash to pay for them. Again, if we can save up for something in 5 years or less, right? If you can save in 5 years or less, right? And you're going to use that money within that 5-year period, then you don't need to be investing it. So you need to just have this money going into some, what we call a sinking fund. A sinking fund being some earmarked savings account or something, some pile of money, some bucket of money where you can put money away for some specific reason. And so one specific reason may be purchasing a vehicle. And you do not take money out of that until you're ready to purchase a vehicle, and you only use the money you have in there to purchase a vehicle. You do not go into debt for anything. Okay? So in that way, cash is king because it will keep us out of debt. Right? And it'll keep us owning assets. That's what we want to do, right? We want to own assets. We don't want to be in a place where we are, in debt for the things that we have, right? People say all the time that they own things. Well, you don't own anything until you are out of debt for that thing, okay? If you're financing a car, you don't own that car, because I dare you to miss a couple payments. Miss a couple payments and you'll see who owns that car. The people who own that car are the people that you're paying month after month to take that car from them month after month. But once you get that car paid off, once you're at the point where you're actually debt free, then you own that car. You are out of debt and you actually own assets. And that's what we want to do. We want to own assets. We want to pay for things in full. We want to have the money in order to do that. And cash is king in that place. Cash is king in that place where we can pay for things in full, stay out of debt, and have assets in our name that we don't owe anybody a dime on. So this is the cash is king argument, okay? The cash is king argument is very, very simple. It's very simple. It's basically saying if you don't want to go into debt, which is our baseline, right? That's really one of the baselines of the financial action plan, is that we are not going into debt. We're going to stay out of debt. We are going to keep away from debt. And if you're going to keep away from debt, then you're going to need money in order to pay for things. And the only way that you're going to have money to pay for things is if you have money saved up for emergencies within an emergency fund. So if something happens in the short term that you couldn't have planned for, that you must pay for, then you can absolutely pay for that thing. Okay, so you got to have an emergency fund. And it's saying that if you don't want to finance everything, right? You don't want to go into debt for your vehicle. You don't want to go into debt for a boat. You don't want to go into debt for any number of assets, especially the depreciating kind, right? Then, and you just want to pay for things in full, then you need to have cash on hand in order to pay for those things in full, okay? And when you have cash on hand in order to pay for those things in full, then you have power, you have those assets, and cash is truly king in your financial life, okay? So these are both of these arguments. Cash is trash, cash is king. Now, where do I fall? How do I feel about cash is trash versus cash is king? Well, I feel like they are two very, very different thoughts. People will put them side by side. They'll parallel these thoughts, but I think they're very different, okay? I think that over the long term, yes, cash is trash. Okay, over the long term, there's no reason that you should be holding the same amount of cash in one place over a long period of time, or that you should just be putting away cash for no reason into a savings account over a long period of time, because cash is trash, because the value of your money is going to go down, and because you can be making so much money elsewhere, okay? The same arguments that I made earlier, okay? So I think over the long term, yes, absolutely, cash is trash. There's no way you're going to catch me having money that I don't expect to spend on something in the next 5 years, or money that is in my emergency fund. There's no way you're going to catch me with any other money that is just going to be sitting in cash. Everything else will be invested in some way, shape, or form. Okay, that's how I go through my financial life. That's how I teach you in the financial action plan. Okay, I don't tell you to be having savings for every little thing. Okay, I tell you that you need to have an emergency fund, and if you need to, build little sinking funds, little other savings accounts for, things like vehicles that you're going to save up for and pay for in less than 5 years, then by all means do that. Okay. But past that, everything else is investing. Okay. I don't talk anymore about saving money. Everything else is investing, because cash is trash, because I want the value of your money to be going up substantially over time and surpassing the growth of inflation instead of falling behind inflation and going down in value over time, okay? So I feel like, yes, over the long term, cash is trash. But I also have very, very strong feelings towards cash as well, because there is nothing like having a nice pile of cash that's sitting there just in case you need it, okay? There's something nice about pulling up your bank account and knowing that that amount of money is there, that amount of money is your money. That amount of money is there in case something were to happen in your life. That amount of money is there in case your car just bursts into flames tomorrow, right? You have money and it puts you in a powerful financial position. In the short term, cash is king. Okay, in the short term, cash is a powerful thing, right? Cash is king because kings are powerful, right? Kings rule. Kings have the ability to make decisions. Kings have options. Kings don't have other things holding them back. Kings make decisions, and that's it, okay? And when you have cash, you can just make decisions with your cash, okay? There's nothing that holds you back from buying things as long as you have the money to buy it, okay? Or nothing holds you back from paying for something, paying for an emergency that occurs if you have the money to go ahead and pay for it, okay? So cash is king in the short term. There is nothing, I promise you. Build a nice little pile of cash. So I don't know. That may look different to every single one of you. I talk about having 1 month of expenses in an emergency fund, and then once you're out of debt, building that up to 4 to 6 months of household expenses in an emergency fund. Try having 4 to 6 months of household expenses in an emergency fund and see how that feels. See how that changes your spirit. See how that changes the way that you view your financial life. See how it changes the way that you live your life in general. Okay, you don't have to run around living your life in fear. You don't have to run around thinking about the cost of everything and being worried that you can't pay for something. You know that you can. Now, it shouldn't put you in a place where you're just ready to spend on all these different types of things. No, you shouldn't want to ever spend your emergency fund. That money should be money that, again, you want set aside that just sits there in case you need it. But if you have to, you know you can, and you are very, very willing to do so. Okay, just reach over to it, spend the money that you spend, and then replenish it over time, and you are perfectly fine. Okay, cash is king when it comes to the short term. Cash is king when it comes to your needs. Okay, your short term needs. Because again, investing is a long term need. Growing your money for the future is a long term need. That's why cash is trash over the long term. And so having cash as a large part of your quote unquote investing strategy is going to be problematic over the long term. But again, in the short term, cash is king. Okay. Now, where do I lean heavier on these two arguments? Okay. Which one do I lean heavier towards? I lean far, far heavier towards cash is king. Okay. And here's why I lean heavier towards cash is king. Because I don't think anybody is just stashing away money in cash for retirement. I think everybody's trying to grow their money in some way. Now, whether or not it's aggressive enough is an argument for another day. Whether or not it's allocated properly is an argument for another day. Okay. But ultimately, if you can do two things, you can be financially successful. Now, not to the maximum of financial success that you could have. Okay. But if you do two things, you can be financially successful. If you can get out and stay out of debt, therefore you don't have a strain on your cash flow, and you can save money. Okay, not invest. If you can save money, okay, if you can do those two things, and you can also spend less than you make, then you are going to be able to go about living a strong financial life over a long period of time. Now, ultimately, do we want to be investing for retirement? Obviously. Do we want to be growing our money for the future? That's why I talk about it so much. Do we want to be a victim to inflation? Absolutely not. We do not. Okay, but when it all comes down to it, if you can do those couple of things financially that will allow you to have good financial habits and have a good financial foundation, then over the long term, you will be okay. All right. And again, I don't think too many people are out here investing their money in just cash. And if you are, then you really need to rethink your investing process, because that's not really an investing process at all. Okay, you need to talk to somebody who knows a bit more about this, or listen to this show on a day-to-day basis, and I talk a whole lot about investing and what we should be doing with our money, not just putting it into cash, okay? So, is cash trash or is cash king? I will leave it up to you. But this is my thought process when it comes to this argument. And hopefully this helps you to view cash in a healthy way now and understand that there are different parts of our financial life where each of these statements is going to be true. And you may just put more power into one side or the other. But the power that I put is in being out of debt, having cash set aside for emergencies, being able to pay for things in full, right? So cash being king is so huge. But I do not at all discount the fact that cash is trash when it comes to investing and when it comes to putting money away over a long period of time. So thanks for watching this video. If you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's really good supplemental materials to all the things that I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And then if you need somebody to help you to build a financial plan and keep you accountable to that plan over the long term, then I can do that. Then just DM me on any of the major social media sites and tell me that you are interested in financial coaching sessions, and you and I can begin working together building a financial plan that's specific to you and your family's needs, and then pushing towards some financial goals that are specific to your life and your lifestyle, and then ultimately pushing you on towards long-term financial freedom. So tune in Monday as I continue talking about personal finance topics that I think can be useful for you in your long-term financial journey. So thanks for tuning into this episode of Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. God bless.